I did this last time too. I think the setting had it off for panel. I don't know, but it should be good now. So
By doing that, I'm going to first thank our sponsors for sponsoring today's webinar, which is AHP Architects, BSC Group, thank you, Frank, and Reamer and Bronstein. And I've asked Corinne Molesky, we've asked Corinne if she could help us to wrap up our virtual networking by just giving us a brief update on what's happening with AHP Architects. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Corinne.
Okay, hi. Ironically, I just got a voicemail about 48 units in Quincy. So AHP, we are definitely seeing uptick in the last, even in the last week, of some really great activity happening. None of which is in, our typical corporate office structure, but we are seeing a lot of office multi-tenant commercial office lobby renos. I've been asked to do 3 of those in the last week. We're also working in clean room and life science type projects right now, including GE Healthcare and a couple other ones that are cropping up. I'm working on a bakery. I got asked to work on a detox center, and ironically in the same week, a dispensary. So we're very full circle right now. This is just a quick, say it again?
Are they in the same building?
No, but they're close by. It was kind of funny when that dawned on me. So this is just a quick slideshow of a project that we have recently completed with National Development. I don't think I have control of the screen, do I?
No, I think Erin does.
no, but hold on one second.
You can just kind of click me through. So this just tells a little bit of the story about our firm. We are over 10 years old now, located in Lowell in the boot mills. We're focused primarily on corporate life science, retail, and research and development facilities. We do have our hand in some of that multi-family residential as well. Interior design, architecture from fit up work, and also new building construction. These are some of our repeat clients. We really pride ourselves on building long-term relationships. So regardless of project size, we're really interested in partnering with people who are looking to build a long-term team so that we can service them over many years. So hopefully you guys recognize some of these great names. With our long-term relationships, that has taken us across the US and outside of the US with companies that are looking to have multiple facilities but don't want to reintroduce a new architect each time that they do something. So these are some of the places that we've worked in the past 10 years. So this is 20 Cabot Road in Medford. These are the before photos. This is a multi-tenant office building, primarily Citizen Bank, but they do have other tenants in here as well. So this is what we walked into. As you can see, really tall granite clad walls and sort of these invasive light fixtures that really catch your eye when you come in. Some dated furniture and dated colors and things like that. So when National Development bought this building, they brought us in to take a look at this lobby, adding a fitness center into what was an existing mechanical room, and creating a spec suite for potential tenants to take a look at. The next slide shows just a little bit of our conceptual work there. So looking at the different furniture layouts, we were trying to fill a very large space, and we were trying to do it in a way that didn't feel cookie cutter, that felt special, that felt kind of a hospitality type vibe, almost like you would feel in a hotel lobby. And then on the right, this is actually pulled off of our Instagram. This was a picture I took after we met for the first time, we were kind of just getting an idea of what kind of colors they might want to use, materials and things like that. So this is really the starting point for the project and getting a direction in terms of where they wanted to go with it. Did they want to do sort of a traditional grays and whites and blue? In this case, I was excited because they opted to do the pink and orange scheme and do something a little bit less traditional. This next slide shows some conceptual renderings. So that same view that you saw of the light fixtures coming down, this is with that, you know, sort of faux metal wall removed and giving them an idea of what they could create in the space. So we are introducing different pendant light fixtures. We reclad the walls in a different material that's actually a very thin, large scale porcelain sheet that's like 4x8 sheets. And it has a cool kind of glossy look to it. And then we also showed them some conceptual sketches for that gym space that you see in the bottom right. And then this is actual photograph of the finished space. So we're excited about, you know, how closely that resembled our concept rendering. And all the way in the back, the kind of lime green accent piece is actually a moss wall. In our first designs, we had a living wall, but it was extremely expensive and it was going to be really expensive to maintain and get someone up there. So we opted to do a moss wall, which was probably a quarter of the upfront cost, zero maintenance, and anti-static, so it doesn't have dust collection. So it was kind of a neat compromise that we came up with to still give them something really focal and natural, but something that they didn't have to maintain and was much less expensive. And then this last slide just shows some of the details. So we redid the elevators over in the top left, the fitness room space, and then a couple of details in the lobby using a wood detail behind the TVs to add some texture and color variation right next to a back painted white glass. So you get a nice contrast going. And then just, you know, some detail shots showing the furnishings and plantings. So now what's exciting is they have some tenant activity and we're doing some fit plans for the space because obviously their goal was to get better occupancy rates in here, and these common area renovations certainly lend themselves to being a better competitor with the surrounding buildings in this area.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the update. It'll be great once you have photos when people are all back to work as well too. Looking forward to that. So, but thank you, Corinne, for the update. Thank you for sponsoring. Thank you to AHP, BSC Group, and Remer Bronstein for sponsoring our webinar series. And thank you everyone for attending the series. This is a new series, and Erin, I think you've got a PowerPoint presentation as well too. I don't want to just kind of quickly go through. But this is a new webinar series that Demetrius Spanius, President of Land and Sea Real Estate, will be moderating. And really, Demetrius, you helped to initiate this over coffee 6 months ago, whenever it was. So thanks for putting it together, and I look forward to all the presentations, but I look forward to today's and getting us up and running. Before we get into the agenda, I just want to let you know quickly, Erin, if we can get to keep going right there. So we have a number of other series that we'll be going through as well too. I think we have speakers lined up for the next few, but if anyone's interested in speaking after November, please let us know. And the next slide, we have also a number of other events that are upcoming regarding what's happening in Middlesex 3 with the City of Lowell General, Farley White, Town of Tingsboro, the Town of Tewksbury, Those will be in September, October, and November. And thank you to Fulcrum Associates for sponsoring those. We also have a business leadership series. Our next one is on September 17th, which is going to focus on the future of life sciences and workforce development, which we know that that certainly is a growing area. We want to make certain that we have the workforce prepared to continue to grow that area. And then on November 3rd, we have Secretary Pollack will be talking about what's going on with public transit as well, too. So thank you to the BSC group for sponsoring that series as well, too. We have a number of great sponsors, but we do have a number of other sponsorship opportunities, which I would be remiss if I didn't throw that out there as well now, too. And regarding our membership, thank you. Just to let our members know, we have a number of subcommittees on transportation, workforce development, real estate and infrastructure, and marketing. If you're interested in getting involved with these subcommittees or just hearing more what the focus is, and we'd love to hear from you guys and have you at the table, the virtual table, or just connecting with our members, please let us know, and we'll put the link to the subcommittees in the chat box as well, too. Oh, and if you want to hear more about that, please either connect with myself or Erin Kakinda or Steph Britz. If you don't know either Erin or Steph, I'd love for you guys to connect with them. They're great. And if you are, we'll go to that. Yeah, if you're not a member, we'd love to have you become a member of Middlesex 3, and we'd love to connect with you and let you know more about that as well, too. So I just want to quickly go through that because I think everyone really wants to get to our speakers as well, too. So just to quickly go through the agenda, we've started with everybody off the screen as a webinar, and we thought that helps us really to focus on our panel, and then it allows our attendees really just to sit back, have your lunch, and without being seen. And then around 12:45 or 11 o'clock, I'm going to leave that up to our moderator. We're going to begin our Q&A. And at that point, we're going to bring everybody back on screen. So if you want to participate in the discussion, just turn your video on and you can be part of the conversation. If you want to just listen and not be part, just keep your video off and you can just listen as well, too. So with that, I'd like to thank our panel and our moderator, starting with Dimitris Spanias, President of Land & Sea Real Estate, Gary Campbell, CEO of Gilbert Campbell Real Estate, Mark Gallagher, founder of Seal Harbor, and John DeAngelis, the founder of Earth Realty. Thank you all for joining us and participating in today's webinar. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dimitris Spanias. If you don't know Dimitris, I recommend connecting with him either virtually or over coffee. We're fortunate to have him here today. He has led a dynamic life. I'm gonna embarrass you a little. As an international award-winning composer, a public speaker, a world traveler, a cultural diplomat, a college professor, a consultant, and is currently the president, broker, and co-owner of Land & Sea Real Estate, where he specializes in both luxury, residential, and commercial real estate. So Dimitris, thank you for joining us and leading the discussion, and I'm gonna hand it over to you guys now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you all, and welcome to the first of this series. Just really quickly, the interesting thing is that the series is something that Stephanie and I started talking about probably, I think we first started talking about this maybe even 2 years ago and started bubbling this idea. And then, I think it was this past fall is that we started thinking about trying to do it this year. Interestingly enough, never did we believe when we started doing this that the whole COVID epidemic would happen. And so really, as I was beginning to structure where I thought these panels were going to go, it started to be influenced heavily by the COVID epidemic, because how could it not? So even though this is not a COVID panel or a COVID series, I mean, that has to influence it because that has changed the topics throughout the year. I mean, just to give you a quick idea, if you look at the October panel, it's going to be on how restaurants have changed and what we have to do with restaurants. And the new paradigm there. And November's topic has to do with the increasing need now for industrial warehouse and distribution centers. I mean, these were not topics that you'd be necessarily talking about 10 months ago. So that's important. And then even so about doing housing. I mean, I would always, of course, do housing, but this would be a topic for March. not necessarily for September, because things have changed so rapidly, and now, September is now kind of the new April, so to speak, in the housing market. So keeping this in mind and all the rapid changings, and again, how COVID has influenced how things are changing, this was, I thought, a great time to do this panel, to be the first one. So that being said, so before we go on to the rest of this, I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves, give a couple of minutes about who you are, what you do, what you specialize in, kind of your thing. And from that, we'll go into the questions. So Gary, I'd like to start with you.
Great, Demetrius, thank you very much. I was looking forward to this. Really looking forward to a fun conversation. So I'm CEO of a family business, Gilbert Campbell Real Estate. We own and manage about 2,000 units of residential real estate in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. A lot of it is, kind of older properties from the 60s and 70s that we built and have maintained since then. But also we've done some new development. We've done a couple of 40B projects. And recently I was president of the State Home Builders Association. And most recently, I was chair of the Multifamily Council Board of Trustees of the National Association of Home Builders. So I'm happy to, kind of give my perspective on what's going on locally, both in single family and multifamily, and then also kind of a national perspective too. So happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Mark, please.
My name is Mark Gallagher, and I'm the managing partner for Seal Harbor LLC. We develop predominantly single-family residential homes in Massachusetts and in Maine. The last 5 years, we have focused on 40B projects in Massachusetts, in Maine on higher-end residential components of the real estate market. And I'm happy to be here today. And Demetrius, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you. John?
Hi, Demetrius. Good afternoon, everybody. Fortunately, I've been very blessed with the fact that I've had 6 decades of repurposing properties. And luckily, I've been able to stay within that 6 period of decades without leaving the fact that I've seen so many changes every 10 years in housing. It started with taking typical apartment buildings, converting them, and seeing the new direction of young people that really wanted to get involved in ownership of properties. And all the way up through mansions, the large estates, 50, 60 room mansions that people wanted to own part of. And now the mill buildings, as you know, Demetrius, very big part of my life. And instead of finding land, I found a city to work in. And in that city has given me so much opportunity. And just to watch the city grow, they respect what you do, and it makes it much easier. And you just see generations of different buyers and different varieties of life. And I appreciate this opportunity today.
Great. Great. Thank you, John. Thank you. So gentlemen, as I just was kind of joking, but not really joking about that September is the new April. I know what I've seen on the brokerage side of what's happening in the housing market, but I just want to open this question up to all of you, to no one in particular, to say, what's going on with the housing market? Oh, Mark, you're muted.
Sorry. Playing with my button, sorry. I'm off mute now.
Okay, so I don't know if you wanted to answer, but in essence, what's going on with the housing market?
Well, the housing market is still very strong. There are a lot of impediments in the marketplace, which I think we can all share. There are childcare issues that are intervening. The supply chain is definitely broken. I think you said that September is the new April. We're looking at starting new projects right now. We've been winding up with projects that we've had, getting fielding calls from our suppliers telling us that, with the coronavirus in full bloom or winding into a new bloom, there are all kinds of supply issues. Lumber is going to be very scarce in the fall. If you're building in the market right now, pressure treated lumber has been scarce for the past 6 to 8 weeks, where you're calling the lumber companies on a daily basis and finding when lumber is coming in, then overbuying so that you have some product available to be able to work with that. You've got overseas companies that are closing. We just got notification that Samsung is closing for an indefinite period of time in China. You have Bosch that is closed in Germany. You've got a myriad of companies that are closing. And then you have, direct labor issues that are obviously affecting us, where folks are out because they have the virus, they're being tested for the virus, they can't get childcare. About 45 to 50% of our staff has not come back to work since March because concerns over the virus. I'm sure Gary and John, you probably experiencing the same things, where you don't know on any given week who's going to come to work. As soon as they say, geez, I might be infected, they are immediately, put aside. And then, you have to start with who they've been in touch with and how long is it going to be before you get tests. And, it's a constant juggle. I do my schedules on Sunday nights and I wonder on Monday how I'm going to be affected by the virus. And, with the supply chain, we're looking at much smaller projects, where we're used to doing 100 to 200 units at a time. We're looking at much smaller projects so that if there are stagnation, and we understand that the market is strong, but you also have pent up demand. People I spoke to, and Demetrius, I'm sure you are very well aware, brokers across the area are extremely concerned. They're very nervous. They're very frustrated. You get your first time home buyers that may be in different types of units that want to move up. For them to move up, there has to be somebody that allows them to move up, because new construction can't fill all the holes. We don't have the ability to get land. John, you're blessed because you're able to reuse properties that are existing and out there with relationships. But from a new time, a new home builder, getting property is extremely difficult. And if people don't want to move, they're not going to free it up. And as the older people, and I'll put myself in that same category, you're concerned. You're not out looking at housing right now. And if you are out looking at housing, you're looking at it 6 to 9 months down the road. So between, daycare issues, personnel issues, supply chain issues, and land issues, and where the customer is going to go, where you don't have a lot of inventory, I think it's going to be a very challenging fall, with the election cycle and also with not knowing where the coronavirus and school systems. It's going to be a very challenging fall for home builders everywhere in the country, including the Northeast, not knowing exactly where things are going to go.
Well, let me just jump in there, and you guys please jump in as well. I think one of the issues is the fact with the school systems, and how is that going to change? Because traditionally people would be looking to move before the school year started.
Exactly.
And now that's changed considerably. And so I don't know what you other gentlemen think about those ideas. I mean, Gary, you look like you kind of.
I think what I was going to say, just in kind of following up with what Mark was mentioning, even before the pandemic, there was this kind of what I would describe a perfect storm of factors that made costs go up. So land prices went up, construction labor was short, all the young people who were in the business in 07, 08 and got out, never came back. And then once production started up again, there were still shortages, despite the fact that overall production was way down over what it normally is. And now you have material costs going up, whether from the lumber tariffs, and now, the lumber manufacturers have cut back production because they didn't think that production would be, ramping up in the middle of the pandemic. So now there's a shortage of lumber and the lumber prices have spiked up. So you've got that, and it's still, is a high cost to do the entitlements. So even before the pandemic, there was this perfect storm, and now the pandemic is just accelerating all these trends and making it even harder. I mean, prices are going up, but that's because supply is so short. And this is even despite the fact that, to the credit of the Baker administration and other administrations around the country, housing construction was considered to be an essential service, and it basically didn't have to stop even during the lockdown. So that was helpful, and a lot of remodeling is taking place because people want to stay at home, and they're doing remodeling projects. But it just makes it harder to provide some level of affordability. And I say with a small a, something that people can afford, entry-level homes, how do young people get a leg up in the housing market and kind of build equity for their future. It's just become very hard. And now you're layering on all the uncertainty around the pandemic. It's the schools, it's also the regulatory, in our world, there's eviction moratorium now. First it was state, now it's federal. There's potential rent control coming down the pike. And then you have the uncertainty about where the tax system is going, because we're incurring all these huge deficits. Taxes are probably going to go up in the next year. So you've got all of that. It just makes, it's just so much uncertainty around all these things that really makes it difficult and challenging to try to plan an investment. You're investing millions of dollars in these new projects, which kind of the entitlement process can take years. And, just trying to factor in all the uncertainty around that makes it challenging.
And John, and I'm going to kind of throw this to you because, in general, your product is a little different. In fact, the school systems really don't really affect you because you're, for lack of a better term, dealing with an over 55 audience. I mean, you're dealing with people who are kind of selling their larger homes and downsizing so to speak, in the condos. And so, what are you seeing and you are also, in essence, you're not doing ground up construction. So, I mean, how are you seeing that the idea of the issues with construction materials and also that market, how is that affecting you?
Well, I've found that I've had to pull permits 2 or 3 times due to labor force and the virus, which has been a major problem to me. So we've decided to take the properties, take and sell to individual developers, maybe 4 or 5 at a time. And I put a new hat on, which is the master developer. Now I can oversee 5 or 6 other developers that have their own crews. I was running out of crews. It's at a point where just the other day we had somebody finish half a job and got sick, and we have to pull new permits now. And that's tough to have somebody come in and take over somebody's work. So I've eliminated a lot of that problems by overseeing and taking care of the common areas and the other developers. And it seems to work, but Gary and Mark are absolutely right. It's a problem.
And so, Gary, I'm going to kind of throw this to you, but of course, as I throw these questions out, everybody please answer and jump in with your own thoughts. I mean, most of us are kind of Massachusetts centric and Middlesex 3 obviously is kind of Massachusetts centric, but we all also work in other states. I do quite a lot in New Hampshire, and then there's Maine, and on the commercial side, I have investors who are buying properties and developments in all over the U.S. and kind of seeing how the different states are handling things, and in Massachusetts in particular, what are you seeing as opposed to the Massachusetts challenges and opportunities, potentially as opposed to other states?
Well, I see that for the last 10 years or so, the real engine of economic growth in New England overall has been Boston, right? I mean, you've got all of these big high-tech companies that are coming in, Google, Facebook, Amazon. They're leasing millions of square feet at a time. So the employment growth, even as a percentage basis, has really been in the Boston area. So even Massachusetts is really an economy of kind of two worlds. One is within 128 around the Boston area, and then the rest of the state. And New Hampshire kind of suffered a lot from the 07-08 recession because New Hampshire tended to actually try to maintain some kind of manufacturing presence, which was reduced during the recession. And they didn't have the same, New Hampshire didn't have the same attraction to some of these big tech companies as Massachusetts did. So I think New Hampshire kind of fell behind a little bit for that reason. But now maybe you're going to see, looking into the future, maybe you're going to see that reverse a little bit because New Hampshire is a very, safe place. There's no state income tax, no state sales tax, beautiful nature. You can really do a lot of things on the weekends. So, you've got some trends that suggest maybe, there's going to be some more growth, maybe more in New Hampshire than in Massachusetts. And I think especially of this big demographic cohort, the millennials. I've got 3 millennial children. When you get out of college, it's fine to have 3 or 4 roommates and you want to live in Boston. And then as you get, as I joke, you make more money, then you have 2 roommates, and you make even more money, you get a promotion, you have 1 roommate.
Right.
But someday, you're going to either start a family or get married or settle down, and you don't want to have roommates anymore. So how are we going to house that millennial population? I went to a conference that Governor Baker did, and one of the big consulting firms said that when they recruit, they have an easier time recruiting people right out of college than they do like the second level up, who are maybe settled down in family because they just can't buy a place. Right? Right. So it was kind of an interesting thing. You can always find 3 roommates and make it work, right? So I think a lot about how maybe New Hampshire, if people are going to work at home more, and it's a more attractive place for kind of raising a family, it might attract more. And we've got to do a better job in Massachusetts in figuring out how to serve that part of the market too. I mean, whether it's through rentals or whether it's through for sale, whether it's through townhouses or multifamily or single family, maybe a combination of all those things, and maybe located around commuter transit or whatever. But I see that as a big issue moving forward, and how we as a state in Massachusetts deal with these issues as opposed to other states. Because New Hampshire, they do a great job with infrastructure. They've upgraded the highways, they've upgraded the roads. They're very professional to deal with. They seem to want housing. They don't have the same pressure on the schools that they did 10 years ago. So you're now seeing that New Hampshire may start kind of getting back some of those households than they would have had. So that's it.
Well, so Mark, I mean, what are you seeing in Maine again as kind of a counterbalance? Because I know you do a lot up there.
The Maine market's very strong, extremely strong. It amazes me. The price escalation has been significant. If you want to be close to the ocean, it's tear downs. If you want to be within view of it, there is some land left, but they're higher pricing, and it's pushing further and further, away from the ocean. Predominantly 55 and older is the hot market. That's really the market that you want to be in, because they have, folks have already paid off their home here in Massachusetts, Connecticut, wherever they're coming from. And they have, deep enough pockets to be able to buy the house and look to the future. So that's a really very rich market. We have tremendous infrastructure already in place. Maine is investing heavily in infrastructure right now. If you've been up and down the 95 corridor, they have ongoing large, trying to make it easier, very similar to a golf course where they clear everything around you so you can make your travels as quickly as possible and get in and get out. They've had a really tough year with the virus. I don't know if there's anybody from Maine here, but the governor hasn't made it easy for businesses at all. Devastated a lot of local businesses, a lot of closings. It's very drab. However, real estate wise, very, very strong. And the growth, the price growth is just, it's absolutely, I don't know where people come up with the money they come up with to build these homes, to be honest, and the age. I mean, it's just amazing, but it's driving, that economy. But the same problems, the same issues. Permitting in Maine is a lot faster. The entitlement process is quite a bit faster than I think all 3 of us are used to. Here in Massachusetts, as Gary said, it can be a 2 to 3 year process to get, subdivision approval for new homes. In Maine, it is not. In Maine, you really, if you have it together, 90 to 120 days, you can be in the ground within 120 to 150 days. So it's a must fast turn. And as I said, the market's strong. The problem with a strong market is you bring a lot of amateurs back into the market, which I think we've all probably, John, especially with your 60 years of experience in one market, you see amateurs coming in and, it causes just nothing but aggravation. So, but the main market is extremely strong.
Good. As I think, as same with New Hampshire as well. And, John, I know you've had some experience, dealing with doing some permitting in New Hampshire where things have been, taking a lot longer than you would have liked, as we kind of chatted about on the
10-year process.
10-year
10 years.
10-year
process.
Wow.
10. Yes. And then the problem is the infrastructure They want you to 100% rebuild their whole town at the same time. So the conditions are incredible, 80, 90 conditions on a development. So that's why we got involved with the mill buildings. Most of our buyers, 90% have sold a large home, they have a second home, and they want that dream. They really want that Boston living in a loft style unit and not pay the price. And fortunately, you're right, it is hot right now. We've seen the prices go from $250,000 in a loft up to $700,000 for the same loft. And it's just remarkable. So and then we find that the smaller units, we call them the micro lofts, those are very popular. Single people can buy 400 square feet, little loft, little open space. And weekends, everybody travels, everybody's doing things. So the single person, 400 to 600 square feet. The couples that come in, it's basically 13 to 2,000 square feet. I've had the privilege to work with Demetrius. He brings probably 50, 60% of the buyers. And it's not even an effort, is it, Demetrius? It's what they're looking for.
Off the shelves, a lot of times, right? Well, yeah, and it's interesting because we are talking about other markets. We mentioned New Hampshire and Maine, and and we were north of Boston. I'm sure people would have their benefits for Rhode Island and Connecticut as well. But the one thing I really think that Massachusetts always had going for it was the mass transit system. And I know a lot of the developers, and particularly out-of-area developers who contact me looking to develop in Massachusetts, want to be on these transit-oriented districts. Anything that's on the commuter rail. For example, John, Lowell is on the commuter rail, and a lot of the Middlesex 3 area is on the commuter rail. And a lot of the towns where I think this is starting to become very interesting, in particular since we're having, for lack of a better term, the mass exodus out of Boston. But people still want access to Boston, but not necessarily having to be there 5 days a week. I think these are important. So I'm going to kind of throw this out there, just kind of as a general question about these transit-oriented districts. Are you seeing more of a need and more of an interest to be near these commuter rail systems? And I think this is the one thing where, until it goes into New Hampshire, this is one reasons why you still have Massachusetts is kind of people still wanting to be in Massachusetts. So I'm just going to throw it out.
Well, the live workspace has been very popular, especially being next to a train station. And I find now with the virus, people believe remain at home to work, at least half of them. And a lot of the couples with children at home, they can live, they can work. But traffic it's back again, as you know. I mean, the highways are ridiculous. But I do find that the live workspace has become so popular. And it's funny because we have, in this particular development that we have 180,000 square feet of space, we have probably 80 or 90 quality units in here. And the weekends there's not a soul here. Not a soul. They're gone. So they live, work, and they escape to New Hampshire, to Maine, wherever, the mountains, wherever they go. And so there's a major push coming that way where people are going to refuse to get on that highway every day. I mean, you can start off in the morning smiling. By the time you get to work, look out. That starts a bad day most of the time. But that's
yeah. Gary, you look like you were going to jump in on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to answer your question, Demetrius, I mean, it's the reality is there's still a lot of interest in transit-oriented development. There's no question, around say MBTA stops, and I think that there's a number of factors here. One is, I think, to go back to the millennial population. I think there's a perception, an accurate perception, that millennials, obviously love living in the urban environment. They want to have access to it. They don't want to spend a lot of time in their cars. They don't even want to necessarily be the ones shoveling the snow or cutting the grass. They have other things that they want to do. So whether that's accurate or not, I think there's still a lot of interest, for that reason. And now, you know, as John said, if you have the option, I mean, if you're in a situation where you only have to go to work 3 times a week instead of 5, and that may very well be where we land, you know, after this, it would be great to, you know, kind of live in your own house, but near a transit stop, so you can work happily in your own house. And then when you have to go into Boston, you can get on the train. And then you're free to do whatever you want on the weekends. And that may, you know, help the suburbs. I mean, you know, I saw a thing from the chief economist of the NHB recently, which he talked about, you know, they're starting to see an uptick in, you know, suburban and even exurban, you know, locations for construction rather than, you know, downtown. And you're seeing some of these big cities, even the rents, you know, like San Francisco, New York, the rents are actually going down now because everyone's trying to get out. So, you know, I think it's, as I said, it's kind of maybe accelerating trends already in existence. A lot of millennials don't want to, you know, eventually when you're 35, you don't want to have the same housing options as when you're 25. And so that will continue to change over time. And I think we've all seen that, you know, for a lot of us, we can work just as happily in a virtual realm as we can face to face, and we don't have to sit in our cars for hours at a time. And when we need to meet, we'll meet. And when we don't need to meet, we'll meet on Zoom. So.
And so this brings up an interesting point, and I'm going to be throwing this to Mark next, is, you know, we're talking about millennials and being around these transit-oriented districts, but, you know, where I'm seeing a lot of developers being kind of interested is actually for affordable housing, just because you might be dealing with families who can only afford one car, or if even one car, and who have to have access to work. And so, you know, Mark, I'm going to kind of throw this to you because of your own experiences with doing 40B projects and kind of what your thoughts are on that.
I think transit-oriented construction, or being able to build around the infrastructure that's in place, is extremely strong. We just finished a 40B in Acton, 28 units, 25% were affordable through MFHA. We could, you know, everybody can walk to the train station. You're 100% correct. Some people don't have any cars at all. Some people have one. Those that are buying from us were extremely interested in electric, you know, the electric capacity of the buildings in order to be able to have a Tesla or any number of the other vehicles that are out there. Most of them either walk or bike to the station. They're all the high tech that Gary spoke about. You know, the Google folks and Facebook and Amazon and all the difference. They only go to Boston when it's a necessity. As John said, they are living and working in place, and they've formed a community, and they're extremely happy. If we radiate it out a little bit, it's a little less strength. But also, you know, a lot of the transit-oriented construction is also based upon how good the school system is, which is, Demetrius, what you said originally. You know, you can, looking at the main market, you can be back in Massachusetts unless, you know, back in to get on the transit system, the MBTA transit system, out of Wells in probably 35 or 45 minutes. But that doesn't mean that the families are moving to Wells, you know, quite the opposite. They're really John's clients that are moving to Wells. You know, transit-oriented, family-oriented, they can get to the city. I agree 100%. You know, with the developers that are coming to you, Demetrius, that's a huge driver. And if the market starts to erode, that's even more safety and less risk intensive for all of us, because that's going to be one asset that we can continue to try to market. Whereas, you know, the hellacious highways are something that people are really going to buck unless you can bring them affordable housing on a mass scale. You know, something that's you know, not been seen around here for a very long time. And workforce housing is such a rifle shot. It's limited to so few communities. It's really not. You know, when we were having our conversation before the panel began today, one of the gentlemen, one of the planners, and I don't remember if I thought it was Tingsboro, spoke about the need to try to update and upgrade some of their ordinances to try to attract that kind of housing. Unless you're doing a rental project like, you know, like Gary would do, it's extremely difficult to bring workforce housing to the marketplace. It's $160 million, I believe, that the governor put aside for it in 2 different programs. But it really isn't aimed at, you know, the general market. It's aimed at markets with school systems are not very strong. It's aimed at markets where the demographics are not very strong, so you can't have a luxury component to go along with. For a rental market, I think it would go great. But for first-time home buyers or folks that are being squeezed out of low and moderate income housing, maybe just above that curve, but not quite ready to be able to get into the retail market, those two programs aren't quite aimed at that yet. So that's, a deterrent as well.
And I from the rental point of view, just follow up on what Mark is saying. I mean, from the rental point of view, what you've seen in the last 6, 7, 8 years is, a lot of the multifamily construction has been on the luxury side. So a lot of it has been in, downtown big cities, urban areas, Boston, high-rise towers, that sort of thing. And it's still, even on the rental side, it's not an easy to hit a certain percentage of area median income, which is, kind of a traditional measurement of what a workforce housing would do. I mean, so you're looking for 80 to 120% of area median income is, the rents would be affordable to that group. Still very hard. I mean, because of all of the factors that are, raising all the input costs, land, labor, materials, entitlements, all of that. And until we can kind of crack that code, it's going to continue to be a struggle. I give the Baker administration credit because they came up with this program that Mark mentioned, which has been successful, but it's very small. $160 million doesn't really get you that much. And as you said, it's directed actually in places like Lowell. There's a couple of wind projects that are taking advantage of that financing. So that's a good thing. But, there's still this, vast sector. And the other thing I would say is that workforce housing or affordable, small a affordable, is going to be very important for the senior market too, because the demographics are so overwhelming in terms of people going into those later years that there's a segment of the market, the middle of the market, which is, they can't afford assisted living at $6,000 a month, and they can't do Medicaid or any kind of state assistance like that. And so now what are we going to do with those folks? And as they get older, they need more services. So that to me is another very much underappreciated and underfunded and underproduced part of the market, that kind of middle senior market. How are we going to house our seniors in dignity? We've done a couple of age-restricted rental properties locally, and they've high demand because, there's a segment, as I say, they just want a nice place to live with an elevator, and it's clean and it's safe. And, they're very happy, but, there's not enough of that around. So
as part of that, I just want to throw one more kind of question up. This might kind of bring in some of these things we're talking about, and that's the idea of repurposing. And, we're seeing all of these empty office buildings and all of these empty retail plazas, and, how are, you're looking at some of these malls that might be 2-floor malls, for example, and, the idea of maybe keeping retail or the stronger retail on the first floor and turning the top floor into, into residential, or, as John is doing, and taking these mill buildings, these factory buildings, old office buildings, and turning them into residential. I mean, what are your thoughts on this idea of housing alternatives? And also, I mean, is this something we can do with all these empty buildings, or is it something that's is just this part of the cycle, and that's going to change again in so many years, and we're going to need retail, and we're going to need more open space? So, Frank, what your thoughts are on that?
I don't think you're going to need retail in the future. I think brick and mortar is going to be something that is going to slowly erode away. We'll have some, I think, in the future, but not. If I was a mall owner, I would be shifting very quickly right now. If you think about what you were speaking to, Demetrius, the Natick Mall tried to have a residential element there, high end. From what my understanding is, a majority of the units went to foreclosure. It just didn't pan out as well. If you go to the Burlington Mall, you see across the street, the developer of that beautiful property has done an amazing job of transforming his office space and reusing, and even the Burlington Mall is starting to do some of that. I just, John, you'd know better than I would, but do you see a residential component in a mall space? I don't know if I see that yet.
No, not yet, but you're absolutely right about what's going on with the malls. And I've noticed since the virus, I have spent more money on eBay and other items. I got hooked on it now. So something that would take me a whole day to find, I can find in 5 minutes now. And so you're absolutely right there. And then the fact is that we've come so far from the old days of driving a car, looking for a phone booth to make a call. Now we're trapped in our cars for hours and we can't use our phone. We can't text. So we're trapped. So I find people now are working less hours too per day. It's not how long you work, it's what you do in a day's time. So when I mean the live workspace, we're creating the live, but the workspace is private. So it's separated. It's not in a spare bedroom in your place. It's an actual place where the public can come, visit, and do business, have a common conference table room, whatever. So that's very popular. And you're right, the malls, I don't see that happening yet, but who knows? Maybe in another year it'll just be there, but I don't know yet. I'm not sure about the malls yet.
Gary, what are you thinking?
I was going to say, I'm agreeing with everything that both, Mark and John are saying. I mean, the one thing I would add is that, I would encourage all, because I know there are a lot of, town planning directors on this call, is to, start thinking about how do we make the zoning more flexible? How do we allow for more flexibility? Because if I've got an idea and it's, kind of mixed use, there may not be any kind of zoning category for that. And it's really hard to kind of create a one-off for that reason. So I think we, in general, we're going to have to be more creative about it. I think about, for example, in Lowell, there's a big homeless population. So I think there must be some, small motels, for example, that are just about out of business now, kind of not chains, that you can repurpose into single room occupancy, housing for homeless people. But hard to do, right? Unless you can kind of get the zoning around it. I'm not sure I see, apartments above retail stores in a typical mall, Demetrius, to be honest. Maybe, you never know. I think more about small kind of mini malls that would just be demolished and repurposed for residential. I do see that because they tend to be in great transit locations near highways, et cetera. And, compared to construction and compared to land costs and everything else, the actual demolition isn't that much. That's not gonna kill your bottom line. So I do see more of that, especially malls that are gonna get in trouble. Even these giant mall companies around the country like Simon, et cetera, their answer, whether it works or not, remains to be seen. Their answer is to try to make it more experiential. So we're going to create experiences. So you're not just coming to the mall to buy stuff. You're going to see music, and you're going to have your kids play and all that sort of thing. And I guess we'll see. So remains to be seen.
Very good. Very good. I think Stephanie wants to jump in.
Well, thank you. I appreciate, this is a fascinating discussion. I appreciate it. It hits on a number of points. But one point I want to bring up before, and I want to bring Chris Clutchman from the Department of Housing and Community Development into the conversation if she's still with us. I know she needs to jump off at 1 o'clock. And many of us know Chris because she was in charge of planning for the town of Westford a few years ago, but now she's in charge of Housing Choice. And I know Mark and Gary, John, you guys touched upon Housing Choice, but I just want to throw it over to Chris if I could before she has to jump off, just to see if this resonates with you and just to get your feedback on this discussion as well.
Thanks so very much, Stephanie, and it's wonderful to see all of you guys, if not remotely. So yeah, I think the Baker-Polito administration, as you guys have mentioned several times, has done all that it can, a lot of things for housing in the Commonwealth. We can't build new land, but we can try and make it easier to change zoning, something Gary just talked about. So the housing choice legislation is in conference committee right now as part of the economic development bill. So we're very hopeful that that will come out and make it easier to change housing, pro-housing zoning amendments. So I'm hopeful for that, and I know you guys are all pretty aware of that, and I've spoken to your group before about that. The program that I run for Housing Choice recognizes 74 communities around the Commonwealth that are doing good things for housing, including Burlington, Lowell, Tewksbury, Billerica, Tingsboro, and Westford. So lots of Middlesex 3 communities are doing the right things. That means they're building housing and they have best practices. So they have a whole bunch of, a suite of best practices related to housing. And the program that I run encourages that because I give away money to communities that are achieving that designation. And so I have $250,000 capital grants available to communities that have the Housing Choice designation. So that's a lever that we can use to try and encourage what I kind of call it good housing behavior, to build as much housing as you can, both affordable and market rate, or in the gateway cities in particular, sometimes market rate is needed even more than the affordable, whether it's small a or capital A affordable. The other things the administration does, obviously, the MassWorks, which is a huge $100 million capital infrastructure program, does give Housing Choice communities a couple bonus points. It also pays for, pays for infrastructure that is going to spur private development. A lot of that is housing. Obviously, we have funds for new housing development through the through DHCD for affordable projects and through Mass Housing and Mass Housing Partnership for 40B projects. We have programs like the 40R Smart Growth Zoning, which encourages and then funds local governments with money back when they do the right zoning. And that's in particular, you guys were having an interesting conversation about transit oriented, and that 40R Smart Growth Zoning is in particular for transit oriented. So that's just a couple words about what we've been doing and what we see out there, but great conversation. I would say Middlesex 3 communities are doing it right. And I think it would be great if we can get the Housing Choice legislation to drop the 2/3 majority to a simple majority for all communities across the state.
Good luck with that. Go get him.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris, for jumping in. And I just want to see whether there was any conversations, before you had to jump off between. You go ahead, Demetrius.
Yeah, if anybody wants to, answer that, please do. I mean, the only thing that's missing in this is we need like a bottle of wine and just kind of passing it around as we're having this conversation.
I was hoping you would compose something for us, Demetrius, actually.
Maybe. No, I'm have exit music at the end, so.
Okay. I just want to say I give the Baker Polito administration a lot of credit for this year perseverance, which they've conducted. They really have taken the housing the situation measures seriously, and they put their shoulder to the wheel and really tried to move it along. And I give them a lot of credit. I mean, that the Housing Choice legislation that Chris has referred to that's been around for a couple of years, and they keep kind of forging on, and it's really close to having it happen finally. So I give them full marks for that.
Great, excellent. Anything else, guys, or any other questions or comments for Chris? Or
this is Erin chiming in. I don't know if you saw Eric Salerno from the town of Tingsboro has a question there, Chris, for you. Did you see that there?
Yes, I do see it. He's asking about adjustments to the 40R program, and if there are potential for school costs, which is called Chapter 40S. Those are two statutes that regulate those programs. I'm not sure. We continue to look at the regulations for 40R, and I do think that's something that perhaps we can continue to take a look at. If you're not aware, there is, in addition to the smart growth 40R, which is the higher density, there is also starter homes. Those were adopted, and I think Gary may be familiar with the provisions of that were negotiated out into regulations. I don't believe there have been any starter home districts anywhere in the Commonwealth, but those are lower density, about 4 units an acre, and they have a little bit of a broader eligible location criteria than the kind of more higher density transit-oriented locations. So I would say, and those are size restricted, the starter homes, and so I would say one way to create natural occurring affordable housing without going through the rigmarole of all the 40R things is communities can adopt size restrictions as an option for local governments in your open space, for example, in the subdivision regulations in suburban communities. You could have an option. Instead of doing more affordable units, maybe you do some size restricted units. So that's something we haven't seen a lot of, and I'm hoping to continue to promote.
And I know, Chris, that one of the issues with 40R is it can be kind of challenging to get through the process. So the bigger towns, have the infrastructure to deal with it, where the smaller towns maybe don't. And I know you're trying to provide funding to help the smaller towns, kind of make their way through the process.
Yes, and I'll be continuing to work with technical assistance and coordinating assistance, and make sure that local governments know about planning grants and planning opportunities. Even just to study your housing needs through the housing production plan or a housing needs analysis sometimes can be very difficult for local governments to do, just based on capacity and funding. Especially now, I would say local governments obviously are going to be taxed, wrong word, are going to be stretched for their budgets because of loss of revenue in the COVID without further relief. So I'm sorry that I do have to hop onto another call at 1 o'clock. So sorry I can't stay for more of your conversation, but folks should know where to reach me. I'll leave my email address in the chat.
Great.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And
I know time-wise we've kind of shifted our schedule a little bit, but that's okay, because this has been a great conversation. But I think it would be a great time to open it up to to everyone else on the call for questions.
great. So what we can do then, first of all, thank you, gentlemen, for the discussion. I think it was a great way to kick off. And if we can just continue the conversation, but bring the attendees, whoever wants to stay on, back into the conversation. So we'll move you from off screen to on screen. And if people have questions and they want to participate in the conversation, they can just turn on their videos and be part of the conversation. And I always find that this is the enjoyable part, because it's more of like the after party, and some people stick around and we can keep the conversation going. We'll do that. We'll bring people back on. And Demetrius, I don't know, I know you had some other questions as well too, if you want to continue the conversation as we do that.
No, you know what? I think that we've kind of covered everything that I wanted to, and we evolved the conversation to other levels, which I thought was what I really wanted to do. Yeah, I know, guys. I kind of gave you. Well, we're probably going to talk about this stuff, but I knew it was going to kind of organically turn into something else, which was kind of the fun of this. So anybody else who wants to jump on these panels as the year goes on, just be forewarned that's going to happen. But I would rather just kind of open it up and see if there's anybody from the audience on the Zoom call who just has any specific questions for any of our panelists.
And I'm looking at questions as well too, as people jump on. And I guess we can kind of pull out people whose videos are on. Corinne, Eric, Frank, Jed. Any of you guys want to jump on in to the conversation? And Eric, I think you're off mute, so I think you're the first to step forward.
Sure. I'm always good for a question or five. So there was some suggestions, obviously, about looking for, most municipalities, I think, do want to add some flexibility for mixed use zoning. But at least from our community's perspective, I know that it becomes extremely difficult for us to incorporate even any new language that's geared towards encouraging mixed use if there isn't a direct connection or direct tie between housing development and the commercial and retail development. And it's actually one of the reasons why a particular project, ran into some issues, political issues here in town. Initially, a project was proposed that would be true mixed use, where residential and retail would be in the same building, and it kept going through modifications, slowly separating the residential and commercial to the point where residents just didn't feel confident that the retail spaces, the square feet, were going to get constructed. And the developer was suggesting that in order to get that retail developed, the revenues were required from the residential, and just would not fly politically. as we look into comprehensive zoning review, I'm trying to gather information from the market itself, particularly experts in the real estate industry, to look for ideas or creative suggestions, or maybe some evidence to say that there are particular ratios or particular ways to approach special permits with relation to mixed use, to help put the public at rest, so that we can get support for those types of zoning changes, just to get to the point where you can propose those types of projects. And, you know, if I'm going to be specific, it's more along the lines of whether or not you feel like it's feasible to finance and or construct and or lease mixed use development if a municipality is requiring residential and commercial to be constructed simultaneously.
Anyone?
I mean,
Gary,
I'm not asking if anybody's willing to propose a project. I just want to know, if that's like way off. In other words, yep, we all want more flexibility, but trying to take that approach, you're going to mislead the public into thinking that it's possible when it's not. Or maybe the developers or the real estate professionals say, well, it's possible if it happens this way.
The one thing I was going to add, Demetrius, in response to Eric's question, is that I think, Eric, what you're talking about is, coming up with some kind of list of best practices, that makes sense. And I would say there's tremendous potential for that, with working with someone like Chris Clutchman, because they have money for that sort of thing. If you were to kind of, whether it's through just Tingsboro or other towns together, commission a study that kind of comes up with a series of best practices, whether it's planners or whether it's architects or developers or whomever. That seems to me a great idea, because I mean, what do real estate developers value more than anything? It's some level of certainty. So I know that if I've got an idea and it conforms to what you want, and there's kind of written practices associated with it, I'll have a high probability of getting it approved, when I start down the road a year or two before. So I would, that would be my gut thought was great idea for a best practices study funded by DHCD.
Yeah, I would just like to add in, I liked some of your earlier comments, Gary, about the time it takes to get approvals. And I think I'm concerned about the state of Massachusetts making timely decisions, given the fact that town meetings delay everything. And again, back to the home rule, the 2/3 vote and all that. So I think that in one of these sessions, there should be a concentrated effort in terms of how do you convince the little towns to be more flexible and make timely decisions? Because in this day and age, we haven't got time to wait 6 months, 9 months, a year for approvals.
So just to jump off of that, George, I know we have a number of communities that are online. I see Burlington, Bedford, Westford, Reading, and also Reamer Bronstein that does a lot of permitting as well too. Love to hear some feedback from, and obviously Tingsboro, but I'd love to hear feedback from some of the municipalities or anyone that works in the permitting fields. If they're interested in jumping onto the conversation, that would be helpful. Or not, we can have it a different time as well too. But I guess before, I'd like to hear more conversation as well too, or would otherwise we should let our panelists get on with their day as well too. I think they've got a lot of work to do to fill some of the markets as well too. So this is my opening up to see who else wants to be jumping into the conversation.
And you can just show yourself for a few seconds and then hide your camera again. I know these Zoom things can be awkward sometimes.
Group, so it's really a small group.
Or you can always just ask the question here in the chat box if you have any or any input, and Stephanie or myself can kind of read it to the group. But or everyone's just ready to go on with their day.
Maybe I'm still eating lunch as well too. But Frank, Jed, you guys have anything you wanted to add to this before we wrap it up?
I mean, I'll go back to the question I mentioned earlier. I've been involved in the last couple of years with 3 towns that made a very concerted effort to undertake a friendly 40B that essentially would allow them several years at least to be proof of the unfriendly 40Bs. And so, in those 3 communities, relatively quickly, they were able to go through the permitting process. So maybe it wasn't 9 months, maybe it was 6 months or whatever. And there certainly were ups and downs and things. But again, they were able to marshal their resources to get that done to prevent the unfriendly 40Bs coming into the towns. And I would think a lot of communities might want to take a look at that because, again, I'm not trying to be prejudiced here, but you don't want to have those people moving in next to you. A friendly 40B provides a good amount of opportunity for people to move in relatively quickly, affordable housing in good locations, things like that. So I'll stop my talking right there and look for responses.
Okay, I'm not getting any responses, Frank. I think maybe it's too much of a hot potato issue that we don't want to necessarily be recorded with this, but it certainly is something that we should be addressing as well too. So thank you for bringing it up. We certainly have a lot of work to do with that. One issue that's not as much of a hot area, hot potato, I guess, is that you gentlemen all mentioned was workforce and the difficulty in finding your workers, which I think, my workforce development education friends were not on this call, but I think that's something that we should be going back to them, especially given where we are with unemployment, and look at, and I'd love your feedback in terms of, is that something that we can do or should do to try to train some of the people who have lost their jobs? And what skills would you like to see if that is something? And there are grants out there, and should we be putting that to retraining construction workers? John, I'll throw it out to you if I could.
Oh, myself? It's hard to say. 1 week everything is, there's more people than you can handle, and then it just changes overnight sometime. But nutritionists to handle what's going on today. And to train new people, I've seen it happen time and time again. There's just too many deals going on right now. There's too many developers in one area. I mean, I can look out the window and see at least 15, 20 developments going on right now. And we're not union, obviously, but I just find that if you're in the business long enough, you can gain certain people that are dedicated to you, and that's how it is. There are a lot of workforce out there, but they're not licensed, and that's a big problem. They're qualified, but they're not licensed. So maybe temporary license, I don't know yet, but it's the licensed person that you need because of liability. That's what we're dealing with.
I see people nodding as well too.
And Stephanie, if I could just add to what John was saying, that this is a kind of a deeper long-term problem that needs a lot of thought behind, more comprehensive view, because there's a lot of factors here. I mean, young people, with good reason, want to go to college and they want to be behind a desk doing some kind of higher paying job. There's not so much of a desire on the part of kind of 18, 19, 20-year-olds to go into construction. Despite the fact that for a lot of young people, it's a much better choice. So, as I always jokingly say, who's going to the Caribbean in the winter, you or your plumber? The reality is it could be a really excellent, middle-class lifestyle for a lot of young people who aren't suited for some of these other roles. Yet it's culturally we struggle. So, and maybe, it's like when you're dealing with framing and roofing, I think especially, how many young people are coming into the industry? It's just not enough is the answer. And whether it's because we don't culturally make it desirable, or maybe we don't pay enough, or whatever it is, or maybe young people just don't want to be on a roof when it's 90 degrees out in August. I don't know, but it has to involve, training. It has to involve retraining unemployed workers. It has to involve, voc tech schools when they get them younger, have some kind of program when they're 18, 19, 20, apprenticeship programs that get them into the working world and, getting good paid jobs. So it's all those things, but it's a big problem that's not going to go away anytime soon.
It's getting worse. It's not getting any better.
Well, and I always joke around that, these are all major problems. If they were easy, they'd be done by now. And so, but is it something that we do need to be pulling our resources together to try to encourage change mind shift? I don't know. I guess I'm just throwing that out there as well too.
Interviewed somebody last week for an excavation position. He was recently unemployed. He's been in the industry for 5 years. He took a position. He thanked me for the interview. He took a position. We were offering $40 to $50 an hour. If you think about that from what Gary was just speaking to, this is somebody that had not even graduated from high school, was from outside the United States, legally here, became an American citizen, and he took a job for $78 an hour. Okay, you do the math. It's $165,000 a year without, much of any, risk. And that's the kind of market that it is it's extremely difficult to get anybody, to go through the voc techs, anybody who sees this. The money is there. I mean, look, all of us, look at what we're paying for plumbers. We're looking at paying for electricians. Do the math. I mean, you come out of college, and I went to college and went on to an advanced degree. They're earning far more than probably everybody that's on this call. And yet there's no incentive, because as they are growing up, playing with the video games and doing all of these different things, there is a pull to get into that different market, where it's, I would wonder in 10 years, as our businesses transition to the next group of family members, or even, moves on, who's actually going to work for us? Who's going to work 10 years for that? Because there's less and less trades. Those that do it strong, who do well, are extremely busy. And those that don't do well, which is what I think John was speaking to, you grow a group of relationships, and you're limited by your relationships, because if your relationship isn't with a larger firm that has, a good deal of talent and able to bring talent along, the American dream is to own your own business. So they migrate over. I mean, I tease all the time. I probably have created, in 40 years, 100 businesses, because they come in, they work for you, and it's, they get to a certain level and they can earn a lot more money being on their own. But, the licenses do restrict, the liability insurances and all of the different insurances that are required. It would be great to retrain if you could keep them in the marketplace. But when there is a change, which John has gone through and Gary's gone through and I've gone through several times, and the market changes, the number of folks, get less and less each time there is a recession and then a regrowth. So it's a tough thing, Stephanie, but I would encourage as many people that are unemployed to look at the construction industry, because clearly it's booming now and it's going to continue to be strong for the next few years. And all the negative things that I had said today about the coronavirus, and I said about the challenges in the marketplace, we're booked out 18 to 24 months ahead of time right now. So, I mean, it's not that it's going to change. And I have found that it's more profitable to be in a recessionary market than it is in a growth market. So, if you're well stabilized and you have partners in different municipalities you can work with to bring the kind of housing or mixed use that Eric spoke about earlier, and you have DHCD that is trying, and the Baker administration that's trying, this could go on for a lot longer than it is right now.
And Stephanie, the one thing I would add is that that there's been a lot of talk about, in response to the construction labor issues, increased panelization, increased modular construction. And there's a lot of money pouring into that space. I mean, in some cases, billions of dollars into certain companies. But the business case, from what I've seen, isn't there yet. So we'd all like it to be there if it could really significantly decrease construction costs. And I think panelization is happening more than modular, just because they can deal with the construction labor shortage more easily if they're in a kind of controlled factory setting. Even if you're just, even if it's just the framers, you're bypassing. So but as I say, there's a lot of serious venture capital money that's gone into this sector. But I've listened to them, I've watched it like we all have, and it's just not there yet, I don't think. Certain uses is great if you're, kind of in an urban area and you can't disrupt traffic for very long, it can come in handy for that reason. But in terms of just like a normal suburban stick-built construction, maybe you won't even save much money, and it's just not there yet. So maybe someday.
Yeah, this is great, and you've given us a lot to think about. I think this is just the beginning of the conversation, and that there's really a lot that we can pick up. And I just want to first officially thank the panel, Mark, Gary, John. Thank you guys all for your insight. Demetrius, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I want you to have the last word, but thank you for bringing us all together and for hosting today's conversation as well too.
I get the last word. I love it.
You get the last word. Yep.
So usually you can't keep me quiet, Stephanie, as you know. So. But no, again, I just want to reiterate what you said. I would say thank you, Gary, Mark, John. Thank you very much for joining us. This was a great great panel. It was a perfect, I think, topic to start off the series. I think we had some great energy, some great discussions, and it did what I wanted it to do, which is organically go into this conversation, hitting all of these current topics, COVID or not, COVID, political, national, other restrictions, other opportunities that there might be. And then, having Chris come in from the state was fantastic as well. So again, I just want to thank Stephanie for agreeing to do this panel and to do this series. And it was also great hearing from Kareem at HP Architects as well. And thank you for the support for this program.
And sorry, maybe you don't get the last word. Maybe I do, because I'll pick up from that. And I do, Aaron's reminding me, make certain I thank my sponsors, which is AHP Architects, BSC Group, and Reamer and Bronstein. Thank you guys all for your support. And also, we'll be sending out information for the upcoming panels as well. The next one is the restaurants and the new paradigm on October 13th. And we have a couple of other Middlesex 3 meetings in between. So we'll send that information out, and please, we hope to see you there too.
Right, and so I will get the last word. And I'll say, do please join us for October 13th, because if you think housing has changed this past year, talking about restaurants and restaurant development and how things are being redesigned and reconceptualized, this is going to be a very dynamic topic as well.
Great.
Sorry, Stephanie.
No, you got it. Corinne, I see you took it off mute. Did you want to jump in, or you?
No, just saying thank you guys.
Okay, wonderful. All right, wonderful. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.